We are thrilled to be discussing our topic of HAMx and specifically an insight into reporting on hardware assets for everyone from analysts to CEOs. I'm Rachel Skinner, Digital Marketing Specialist at ITS, and I'd like to kick things off for our CEO, Fritz Byam. Fritz, take it away.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining. I'm Fritz Byam, and I've been working here at ITS for 22 years, alongside a team of our asset professionals and some really awesome customers. And I have to tell you, in that 22 years, I've learned just how daunting it can be to establish and maintain sound asset programs, let alone mature them. It's really tough for everyone. It's tough for the leaders who have to answer for the return on investment. And it's really tough for the women and men asset professionals who have to execute every single day and who care deeply about providing value to their organizations. I'm here to make sure that everyone is clear about what HAMx is and who can most benefit from it. First of all, I think we all understand that HAMP is ServiceNow's modular application that automates many of the HAM work streams via pre-configured workflows. So HAMP, that's the ServiceNow application. HAMx is a prescriptive services offering from ITS to implement ServiceNow's HAMP. So prescriptive offering from ITS is HAMx. So there are two ways that we go about implementing ServiceNow's HAMP module. The first path is this prescriptive offering, HAMX, that we're talking about today. And the second is our assessment-led methodology. We offer two paths to implement HAMP based on your needs and your current hardware asset management maturity. So HAMX is really best for customers who are just starting out with HAM or customers who want to start fresh. HAMX is for customers who need to establish a baseline of maturity in alignment with best practices. So with HAMX, customers are assured of very specific outcomes on a known timeline for a known investment. So that's HAMX, the prescriptive offering. The second path is our assessment-led methodology. The assessment-led path is best for customers who have established some sound HAM processes and want to integrate the benefits of ServiceNow's HAMP into their program. The assessment-led path starts with a workshop or design session to discover the next step of a customer's asset maturity journey or special needs that may not be addressed in the prescriptive offering. I hope you benefit from today's webinar. The team here at ITS has put a lot of thought and passion into development of this HAMX service offering. We see it as a very predictable path to make HAM more valuable to our asset management friends. I would like to introduce two people who have been instrumental in the development of this offering, and they're the experts on today's call. The first is Ben LaChance. Ben is a technical consulting manager, and Chelsea Parker. Chelsea is a business process consultant. They're going to give you some insight into how the reporting included in HAMX will give your organization important performance metrics that support a proactive, optimized hardware asset management program. Thanks again for joining.
Thanks, Fritz. Hey, let's dive into the presentation. Chelsea, take it away.
Thanks, Rachel. If I'm role-playing as an IT director, a senior manager, or a CXO, a large portion of my responsibilities are to set the vision of IT services, determine the components that make up the architecture, and strategically plan for new projects, upgrades, refreshes, and things like that. So, Ben, what kind of information does HAMX bring me, and how is it different than us using ITSM asset management?
Chelsea, that is a great question. One of the big things that HAMX has that ITSM doesn't is reporting of any kind. So any of you that have been involved with asset management inside of ServiceNow prior to this probably know that there is no existing dashboard for any HAM processes at all inside of ITSM HAM. HAMX and HAM Pro have changed that completely, and we now have a home dashboard that if we go under our asset application we can see our hardware asset dashboard where we can get a whole bunch of reporting out of the box. So the big change here is we go from no reporting to an out of the box dashboard that has lots of the information that we're going to need for any of the activities we do, all the way from our being an asset analyst up to, like you said, the IT directors, senior managers, or CXOs.
So what information or report can I leverage when I am overseeing the day-to-day operations of our tech services?
So when we're looking at day-to-day operations, a lot of times we're going to be looking at things at a more basic level. So basic foundation data or audit data to look for things that we need to take action as to fix or to get into better shape. And for that, we have an entire tab that we've built out for HAMx that is built around our in-use assets so that we can actually look at the data from our assets that are active, that are in use, so we can see when we're missing foundational data or data that's very important for us to have on all of our assets. So we can look at things like assets that are in use that are unassigned, or assets that don't have a location. These are all things that if our assets are in use, we need to have this data on them in order for us to track those assets correctly and actually do hardware asset management. So having a view into what we're missing for our assets and our asset data on our day-to-day use is vital. On top of that, we have a view into things like assets that are assigned to inactive users. One of the problems that our customers run into quite often is that they have employees that have left the organization and they don't know what they need to get back from that employee, or if they've recovered it, or kind of where any of the assets that are attached to that person are. So by having this report on assets assigned to inactive users, we can actually see if a user has left the organization and is now inactive in ServiceNow and they continue to have assets assigned to them, then we know that we need to go and recover those assets and get them back into a stock room. So we now have a view into those assets that before have tended to kind of wander off and do their own thing, that we would have liked to recover. On top of that, when we're looking at our inventory tab, we also have a view into some of our basic inventory information, which we're going to cover a little bit later. But most importantly, we have a view into our asset audit dashboard. So HAMx and HAMP include new asset audit functionality so that people like your analysts can go and they can do audits that are on a regular cadence very easily. And we can record that data and we can see what the progress is for our assets audits and see when we have issues with assets. So if we've lost any, if we've found any, if we have all of the expected assets in a certain area. And this is really big as a senior manager or someone overseeing an asset program, because it allows you to come in and see at a glance where your asset audits are and to do actual oversight of your program to make sure that assets aren't wandering off without you knowing. So we can come in and see a view of our different kinds of audits, what the progress is, if they're in progress, who they're assigned to, what other scheduled dates we have on them. And we can actually click into those specific audits to see the actual results on them, to see what we've expected and scanned, what we've scanned and we didn't expect, if we haven't found anything, if we have any new assets. And speaking of new assets, if we go back to our dashboard, we actually also have a view of assets that have been found that were not expected. So these are assets that maybe were sitting in an area that we didn't expect to see there. So maybe if they're on a location, we expected those assets to be in a stock room, but we actually scan them at the location. Now we're going to see, oh, these are new hardware assets that were found by the audit in that location.
That is very useful information, Ben, to be able to see what's under the hood and what's going on a day-to-day basis there. So how can we identify the difference from our current state of the environment versus what has to be fulfilled through procurement?
There's actually, we have two tabs, and we've already been on one of them. We were just looking at our asset audits, but the other part of this tab that we were on, you can see, is marked inventory. And this gives us a view into our actual inventory state for our asset program. So we can actually look at things like assets in our warehouses, if we have loaner assets, or if we have hardware requests that need to be filled from stock. I'm going to call that out as filled from stock, and we're going to go and look at a dashboard in just a second to show why that filled from stock matters. We can also see open stock orders, or if we have any stock rules for our stock rooms or transfers between stock rooms. Those are all things that are visible under the inventory tab that let us track our actual inventory, so that, if we need to be filling requests or filling anything from our inventory, we actually have a view of the inventory. Now, the other side of that, like you mentioned, is when do we need to buy things? When do we need to procure things? And that's where the procurement tab comes in. So now, before we were looking at the orders that we were going to fill from stock, now we're looking at orders that we need to actually purchase, that we need to fulfill through procurement. And so we can actually get a view into who our biggest vendors are by looking at where we're ordering from, where our expenditures coming from, requests that require sourcing, generally through procurement. So we were looking at requiring sourcing through stock. Now we're looking at requiring sourcing through procurement because we don't have it in stock. A very interesting one is that we can see on our map here if we have purchase orders that are pending delivery, and we can actually see where those orders are in the world. So if we have a global organization, we can see if we have kind of a bottleneck anywhere between our assets that we've ordered and what we're actually receiving.
Since I plan to use the reporting features as a significant inputs for my job function, how does HAMx enhance the validity of the data and the reported metrics we see here?
So as we've discussed before, one of the really strong points of HAMP is that we bring in the ServiceNow content library. So that library includes information on normalization for our hardware models, as well as lifecycle data that's been gathered from manufacturers directly that we can bring in and add on to those models. So when we're looking at enhancing validity or making sure that our data is up to date and that we actually have good reporting on it, those two things are absolutely essential. And so when we come in and we look at our model management dashboard tab, we can actually come and we can see that we can look at the normalization status for our different models, and we split that up into both our hardware models, our normal hardware models, and then our consumable models, so that we can see if there's anything different between those two. We can look at our product model status for what kind of product models we have. How long has it been since we've actually gotten data from the content services? That is more data that we're getting in this report, so that if your data from the content services is up to date. Then on top of that, we've got a life cycle overview going on here. Now, like I said, a lot of these life cycles are coming in from the manufacturer into ServiceNow's content services library and then being downloaded automatically. So we can get a view into things like the end of life, end of sale, or end of support for these, as well as when they have general availability. And we can actually drill down into these views to look at our actual specific models that are in a certain life cycle phase. So these are all our models, for instance, that are in the end of sale phase. And I got here just by clicking on that slice of the pie in our report here in our main dashboard. So on top of whatever is coming from ServiceNow, we, as part of our HAMX service offering, also have defined processes that we provide to our customers to increase the reliability of their data and make sure that they are doing best practice activities to ensure that their data doesn't get into a form that it's unusable. So, we've already talked about our in-use tab and how important it is to have our foundational data. the processes that we're talking about with our customers, that we're giving to our customers, are really focused on making sure that foundational data gets entered, that when requests are made, assets get assigned to people and they get taken out of stock and put into the correct locations, that we have all of that data there and that we have it correct and up to date. So those two things in combination are really going to be central to making sure that you have trustworthy data in the system, and that our reported metrics on the rest of our tabs here are useful and actually something that you as a senior manager can depend on.
That's great, Ben. So when I'm planning for future projects or a new budget cycle, how can I use the data from HAM to support my efforts?
Now that is a great question, because we all know that planning is one of the biggest reasons that any of us do hardware asset management. We want to know what's coming up, and we don't want to be surprised by issues that seem to come out of the blue, with things like needing to refresh or models going out of support that we don't know about. So we've already talked about some things like the lifecycle data coming in from ServiceNow that can be useful for that. But we have a whole bunch of other reporting that we can use to be prepared for our financial planning in the future. One of the big ones is that we actually get reporting, as you can see, for models that are up for end of life. And that end of life is driven off of this end of life cycle status that we already talked about. But we can actually see here a view of those models that are going to be in that state this month, this quarter, this year, so that we have a view into what models we may need to cycle out of our environment or start replacing. On top of that, we actually have our end of life tab here so that we can get a much deeper view into the status of our assets and what assets we have coming up into various stages of their end of life states. So for instance, a really big one that we have is that a lot of our customers don't want to run out of warranty on their assets. They want to know what hardware we're going to have going out of warranty in the next couple months so that it can be replaced or warranties can be extended as necessary. So we get a view right at the front of our end of life tab for hardware that's nearing the end of warranty, again, for this month, this quarter, this year. And again, this is a report that we can click into to actually see specific assets that are coming up on their warranty expiration dates. On top of that, we can see if there's any lease contract expirations happening. So if you have leased hardware and you need to be able to gather it and return it or extend your leases, you get a view of that. We see if any of our warranty contracts are expiring within 30 days, 60 days, or 90 days. So if you need to take action on your warranty contracts, we actually have a view here for when those are going to be expiring, and you can actually take action to make sure that those don't expire without replacement or renewal. On top of that, we have another report here. So we have easy numbers in our warranty contract expiration view here, but down here we actually have a view of the specific contracts that will be expiring in 180 days. So if you need to take a little bit of a deeper dive into warranty contract expiration, you have those contracts right on hand. Finally, we have some reporting on hardware asset refresh orders. Hardware asset refresh is one of those base flows that HAMP has brought in and added automation where there wasn't any in ITSM to do hardware refreshes. And so we have some reporting now on that so that we have a view of where we may be in those flows and those requests to actually refresh our hardware. So the actual final piece that we have for our reporting, and I know I said finally down here, didn't really mean it. The actual final piece that we have is our hardware asset disposal. So disposal, again, is one of those new pieces that HAMP brought in. And now we have not only an automated process for disposal that we can easily track through, but we have reporting on what the status of that disposal is so that we know if things have actually been disposed, if they've been carted off, and if we have documentation for it. So again, we start off here with what's our disposal order status. Has it been, if we have any new ones that haven't been acted on, if we have any in progress, if we have any that are just pending documentation, if we have any assets that are missing a disposal order, or if we're missing any data off of those disposal orders. And then we can get a view into our assets that have actually been disposed. In this case, it's all computers, but if we dispose of switches or other types of assets, we're going to get a view into what we've disposed for that year. And we're going to get a view into what the status for our disposals is. So are they in transit? Are they in a draft mode? Or are they completed for now? And then as we're looking at how we've gotten rid of things, we can actually get a view into if we have things pending disposal, dispose, or if we return them on leases. And we can use that to drive some of that future forecasting for, maybe we want to increase the number of leased assets that we have because we found that we have a financial benefit to that. We can actually see as we're returning our leases if we are increasing our leased asset numbers, or if we're still, getting rid of assets in our organization that we own, or vice versa. So all of this end of life data is really going to be very helpful for driving any of that future planning that you're trying to do as you try to get out ahead of that and have a view of how your assets are going to be reaching their end of life before they actually do so.
So it looks like the HAMx offering uses ServiceNow HAM features and industry best practices for my organization and myself as a senior manager CXO to be successful at hardware asset management, including an approach to cost savings and compliance. And it really moves us up the gradient of optimization within the realm of IT asset management. Thanks for walking through the details, Ben. Appreciate it.
Fritz, Ben, Chelsea, thanks for speaking today. And thank you all for joining our webinar, HAMx Visibility, Reporting on Hardware Assets for Everyone from Analysts to CEOs.